And whilst we're just waiting to get started, Luke has put a link into the chat linking to some of the material for the session today. So you might just want to have a quick click on that before we get started.
Yeah, it would be really helpful actually if, because I think when people join Zoom meetings, they can't see messages from before they joined. If people come a bit later and ask for the link, it would be really awesome to help me out if someone could just repaste that into the chat, so I can carry on.
Are you okay to copy that down, John?
Yeah.
Cool, thank you. Right, well, it's about a minute after 2, so I think we'll get started. I'll just let John change the slides around. So welcome, everyone. Thank you very much for attending this training session in Tableau, continued, with Luke from the Information Lab. I'll just run through a little bit of introductory material for those of you that haven't attended the previous session, but for those of you that have, I'll keep it nice and brief. So this session is part of Bristol Data Week 2022, which is a programme of events being held both online and in person across Bristol this week, organised by the Jean Golding Institute at the University of Bristol. Just a little bit of housekeeping before we get started. We are recording this session, so just be aware of that. You might want to turn your camera off. If you leave it on, that's perfectly fine. All of our events, we have a code of conduct for both all our online and in-person events, and John's going to be sharing a link to that in the chat now. Just for the comfort of everyone, please make sure you have your microphone muted unless you're speaking or asking a question. And also, we'd love to get as much feedback as possible, so for who is attending our events that we organise, and then also feedback after the events. So John will also be sharing shortly a link to a quick sign-in form, just to say that you're here. If you could fill that in, it would be really helpful, just so we know who people are and where they've come from. And it might be just a nice opportunity now, just for those of you that are here, just to introduce yourself in the chat. So just to say hi and who you are, just so we get a little bit of interaction going. So please take the opportunity to do that now whilst I'm talking. So the Jean Golding Institute is the central hub for data science and data intensive research at the University of Bristol, one of the university's research institutes that sit across all faculties at the university and work on multidisciplinary projects. So we try and involve people from cross faculties and cross subjects at the university. We've got 4 kind of work streams that we work in, and I'm just going to pick up the second one there, which is data visualization, which is something that, the tool that Luke will talk us through today is something that is really useful for doing that. And if I have the next slide, John. There are lots of events going on today. We're about halfway through. I would really recommend that you check out the interactive schedule that we have. Again, that's on our website, and John will be sharing the links, but it's at the bottom there as well, bristol.ac.uk/Golding. It wouldn't be possible to run the week without all of our supporters and sponsors, so I won't go through them all, but here's a slide here just showing some of their logos, and thank you very much for making this week possible. There is one event in the schedule that I think we'd just like to plug, because it's something that's a little bit different and it's really fun. It's for the 2nd year running now. The JGI has sponsored one of the prizes at the Bristol Science Film Festival. So there is a Data Science and AI Film Prize, and I'm lucky enough to be on the judging panel this year. So I've seen the films already, and I don't know who's won. I only know which ones I liked. But the films will actually be screened at the Watershed at 3 p.m. this Friday. It's free entry, so please do come along if you're in the area. And yeah, and I look forward to seeing them on the big screen. and there'll be some Q&As with the creators of the films, and also we'll be announcing the winner live. So that sounds like it'll be really good. So I'm looking forward to that. And please do keep in touch with us. So if you haven't signed up to our newsletter, go to our website, bristol.ac.uk/golding. I'll stop saying that now. Sign up to our newsletter. If you're using social media, you can follow us on @JGI Bristol. And if you're using something like Twitter or LinkedIn, there's a hashtag Bristol Data Week, which would be really good if you could use when you're sharing your thoughts about the event. So I think we're done now with the introductory slides. So I will now hand over to Luke from the Information Lab, who has given the previous training session, but I'll give him a very quick intro. Been using Tableau since 2012, and been a consultant at the Information Lab since 2015, and has in 2019, I think it was, became head of recruitment at the data school in the Information Lab, and is here today to continue telling us about Tableau. So Luke, thank you very much.
Thanks, James. So welcome everyone. Welcome back if you came yesterday, and thank you for coming back. Hopefully you enjoyed it. Today's session is going to be more kind of more in-depth functionality around Tableau. So we're going to look at things like joining data. We're going to look at some other chart types, and we're going to also hopefully recreate, if we have time, Hans Rosling's famous scatterplot, animated scatterplot, which contrasts life expectancy and fertility rate over time. So that's kind of what's on the agenda today. If you weren't at the session yesterday, it has been recorded. I'm not sure where on the JGI systems it's going to be put, but I apologize if I kind of go quickly through stuff we covered yesterday, but I'd encourage you to watch the recording from yesterday when it becomes available. Okay, perfect. It's going to be on the JGI YouTube channel. That's great. I've put a link in the chat about a file share. We used the same one yesterday. It's on Google Drive. So if you could all navigate to that, I'm going to share my screen in a second and get you to download a few things. As I said yesterday, everything on that Google file share, the Google Drive, is for public consumption. I'm not precious about any of it. If it helps you learn Tableau, then I'm happy. Feel free to download the whole lot, work through it. I really don't mind. As I mentioned at the beginning, if someone is able to paste the link into the chat, if there are any latecomers, that would save me a job and save me having to monitor the chat too closely. I also, before we start, I also have my window open here because, in case you hadn't noticed, it's pretty warm today, and my room gets very hot here. But there is some building work going on, so if it gets too noisy or annoying, please let me know and I'll shut my window. All right, and also apologies to anyone else who was hoping this was going to be an in-person session. I certainly was, but through circumstances beyond my control, namely my wife getting COVID, we've had to move it to online. So hopefully we'll be able to meet in person another time. Right, I'm going to share my screen. There we go. And also, as I put in the chat, if anyone hasn't downloaded the free Tableau Public app, please do so now, which is the link you can see on the screen. I also put it into the chat as well. It's going to be mainly hands-on. I don't have any slides today like yesterday, so you're going to be using this. I have also circulated the slides, or sent the slides on from yesterday to the relevant people at the JGI who are going to share them with all of you. There are some resources in there as well. So for now, what I'd like you to do, we're going to do a little warm-up, I think, of just some other chart types. So yesterday we built a bar chart, we built a map, or a couple of maps, and we put them all together into a dashboard. A line chart we did as well. There are some other charts which are probably useful to understand how to build. I'd like you to go into the starters folder on Google Drive and download this one, Go Past Tables and Bar Charts Starter. I'll give you a minute or two to do that. There is, in the solutions folder, there is a completed version of this workbook as well. Don't download that for now, but it's there for your reference. We won't get through all of the charts that are in there, but we should get through some of them. But you can go in your own time and just reverse engineer them and have a go yourselves. If there are any questions, please put them in the chat, or also feel free just to unmute yourselves and just yell out, and I can always try and answer questions kind of as we go. Okay. I'm just going to open that file myself. I'll tell you what we're going to have to do. I think you're going to struggle to open that in Tableau Public. What we're going to do instead, Tableau Public needs to use extracts. What we're going to do is, instead of opening that starter, what I'd like you to do is go into the data folder. We're going to use the same data set that we used yesterday. So if you still have that from yesterday, download that one. Sample EU Superstore in the data folder of Google Drive. In the slides I shared yesterday, there are also some instructions onto how you can get the full fat version of Tableau Desktop. That is kind of more flexible than Tableau Public, which we're using now. The interface is essentially the same though. So what you're learning today will be absolutely fine to get you started with Tableau Desktop. You can connect to more things in Tableau Desktop. So I'm going to start a new workbook in Tableau Public. Here we are. When you load up Tableau, you will likely see this screen here. I'm feeling this might be Tableau. This is where it gets confusing. Right, this is Tableau Desktop. Sorry, just bear with me a second. Okay, here we go. So this is Tableau Public we're looking at. This is what we're going to use today. For those of you who weren't here yesterday, then there are 3 sections to this screen. This is what you get when you load up Tableau. The blue section is the data connections. With Tableau Desktop, the full version, you get a whole ton of these. With Tableau Public, you're kind of limited mainly to file-based data sources. You get thumbnails in the middle, and on the right-hand side, you get some resources. What we're going to do is connect to that data set that we used yesterday. And hopefully, if you weren't here yesterday, you just downloaded it. What we're going to do is go to Microsoft Excel on the left-hand side in the blue section, and just navigate to wherever you've saved that file, click on it, and then click Open. And then, as we saw yesterday, there are 3 tabs in that spreadsheet. I'm not going to open the spreadsheet again, but the tabs match up with what you can see on the left-hand side here: orders, people, and returns. Underneath, these are named ranges in Excel. We're not going to do anything with those today. So what I'd like you to do is drag orders into the middle. This is the main kind of crux of our data set. Again, I talked about this screen yesterday, so catch the video to get more details about this, but essentially Tableau is just giving us a snapshot of the data that we've loaded in. We're then going to go to sheet 1 at the bottom of the screen, which should be highlighted in orange for you. And what we're going to do is build a few charts just to get you into the frame of mind to do some more of the stuff. We're going to start very basic. We did some more visual things yesterday. We're going to start with a basic table. And what we're going to start with is our region. So remember our fields from our spreadsheet. All of these fields match up with a column in our spreadsheet. The blue fields that you can see are our dimensions or categorical data. The green ones are our measures or our metrics. So we're going to grab our region. And then we're going to take our order date as well, which if you remember will default to a year, which is fine. That's what we want. And you can see here how I mentioned yesterday how Tableau is very similar to a pivot table in terms of how it works. What we've done here is build kind of the outline of or the structure of our crosstab, and we just need to populate some values in there. So we're going to grab our sales and just drop it into the middle where it says ABC. You have these sort of placeholders in there. We're going to grab sales and just drop it into the middle. And that gives us our basic table. Now, tables in data visualization get a bad press, often quite justifiably so. They can be useful though if they're kept small to give some context to whatever else you're seeing on a dashboard. So I personally wouldn't encourage you to go further than 2 dimensions in a table. We can add in another dimension here if we want to. Let's grab category. Now we can put category next to region, and that will slice our data even more. So if you remember from yesterday, if you were here, our blue fields, our discrete or categorical fields, they slice our data. They introduce more or less granularity into our data. And our green fields, our metrics, in a visual chart, they will give us an axis. Okay. So here's a basic table, probably just big enough to give some context. I still think a bar chart in this case would be better, but I'm just showing you how to make them. What we're going to do next is you'll see that next to this data pane, where all of our fields are on the left-hand side, we also have something that says analytics. This is our analytics pane. If we click on that, we get some options to put some other things on. The grayed out ones aren't applicable to this particular chart type. I don't really think forecast or cluster are applicable, but you can use them with this, but we're not going to. I am going to just drag on totals. So you'll see when you pick up totals, I'm just left clicking and drag it onto the chart. You get some options for subtotals, column or row grand totals as well. And we're just going to put these on. I'm going to go with row grand totals first. And you can see we get some totals on the right-hand side. If I grab totals again and say column grand totals, we get our totals at the bottom of each column. And then now, because we've got 2 dimensions in here, region and category, we can actually have subtotals in here as well. So we're going to be, in this case, subtotaling by region in this table. So let's grab totals again and just go subtotals. And now you can see that we've got our subtotals in there. So this is very similar to a pivot table in Excel for those of you who are familiar with that. And like we did yesterday, we're going to rename our sheet. So in this case, sheet 1 at the bottom, if we double click on that, we can rename it as basic table. A word of warning with tables in Tableau. Tableau make it kind of deliberately difficult to make tables. And before I did my recruitment role, As James said at the beginning, I was a consultant within the Information Lab within our core consulting team. And it was always a real eye-rolling moment whenever I went to a client and they said, I've got this great spreadsheet, I want you to recreate that in Tableau. As a rule of thumb, if you want big tables with conditional formatting and formatted merged cells and missing rows, and as we've all seen spreadsheets like that, Tableau is not your tool to do that. You can do tables and you can get funky with the formatting of the subtotals and various other things, but it's fundamentally not designed to be a replacement for Excel. Excel is still great. I love Excel. It's if you want a complex table of numbers, then Excel's the place to do it. Tableau isn't. Okay. Right. So that's our kind of the beginning of our evolution of data visualization. And we're going to go on and create another tab. So if you remember from yesterday, you can click the first icon next to where the tab name is. It looks like a bar chart with a plus. And you can also go right to the top and click the same button up there, completely up to you. You'll find as you use Tableau more and more, there are always multiple ways of doing the same thing, and it kind of depends on your preferred way of doing it, which you'll discover as you go along. I prefer using the ones at the bottom, so I'm going to click on that. So yesterday in my slides, I talked about our sensory memory, our pre-attentive memory, and certain pre-attentive attributes that help us, or help our brain get more detail, get more understanding out of what we're looking at, but in a more efficient way. And these include things like color, like size, length, orientation, etc. What we're going to do now is create what Tableau call a highlight table. I would call it a heat map, and Tableau have their own naming conventions for things. And we're actually going to start. Actually, we're going to do something slightly different. We're going to use our order date. So let's grab our order date. And what I'd like you to do is drag order date to columns. And what we're going to do here is we are going to expand this down to month, like this. And actually, we're going to grab our quarter from the middle. If you remember from yesterday, if I go back a step, if you remember from yesterday, we have this little plus icon with dates. That means there's a hierarchy there. Tableau automatically give you this ability to drill into dates, which is really cool. I'm going to click on that plus, go down to month. And I'm going to grab our quarter and just take that out. And I think actually I'm going to take year out as well. So you can just drag year out of the view and drop it somewhere. I'm going to drop it underneath the marks card down here. So we've got our month. And what we could do here is some sort of analysis on sales to see what day of the month normally over all time in our data set gives us the most sales. Is it a Thursday in June or a Wednesday in November? So what we're going to do is we're going to drag order date out again. And what I want you to do is, if you're on a Windows machine, hold down, I think it's Control. And if you're on a Mac, hold down Option and drag order date out and put this on rows this time. And what you'll find is a shortcut. It's a little cheat which allows you to specify the granularity of the date, whether it's a blue date, discrete date, or a green date. We did look at that yesterday. If you're wondering what the difference is in those two things, dates can be blue or they can be green. Have a look at the video from yesterday. We go into that a little bit. And what we're going to do this time is we're going to choose weekday for this particular date and click OK. So now we've got our tabular structure as we did before, with our weekday vertically and our month going across the top. And now what we're going to do is grab our sales, and we're going to put sales onto color on our marks card. So For those of you who weren't here yesterday, the marks card is really central to how Tableau works. It's a place that allows us to change the appearance of our charts. Various other buttons become populated here. You'll see there's some empty space. Depending on the chart type you choose, there are other options that will appear. And we're going to grab our sales in this case and put that onto color. Maybe I'll make this big and see what it looks like as well. So you can click the little drop down at the top and go to entire view. So we can see based on the color, I reckon that Wednesdays in December give us the most sales over the course of time in our data set. And what we can do as well is click on the little icon at the top for show mark labels. And you can put on the actual value in there as well. So you get kind of the best of both worlds with a table. Word of warning with putting the labels on. I think it works okay in a chart like this on the screen at the moment because the cells are quite big. Sometimes you can get quite a lot of data in a small space. So just bear in mind with that. We could also potentially, if we wanted to, split this down further. I don't know, we could add order date onto rows again, and this will be at the year level. So that breaks it down even further. And now you can start seeing gaps in the data where actually in January and February 2015, we didn't sell anything on a Friday. Likewise, Saturday in April, if we're not making sales on a Saturday in our business, I'd be a bit worried about that. And then, yeah, we get that same visual cue of the color. So we can see quite easily that Saturdays in August 2018 were our most popular days. Okay, so there's a whole load of stuff you can do with these highlight tables or heat maps, if you want to call them that. Right, let's move on. Let's call this highlight table. Let's make another one. What we're going to do next is create a stacked bar chart. So we're going to use that same bar chart starting point that we had yesterday. So for those of you who weren't here, we're going to take subcategory, put that onto rows, and we are going to take sales, again, and put this onto columns. For those of you who weren't here yesterday, the data set we're using now is Tableau's own data set. So it's a fictional superstore selling a variety of different products. It's, as I said, it's not a particularly interesting data set in terms of topic, but actually it's very well designed. Tableau have a whole department of people who work on this data set to make sure it's up to date, and there are decent trends and things like that in there for training. So it's quite useful for this sort of stuff. I'm going to put this onto entire view again. And then we're going to go to the top of the screen and we're going to sort this again, like we did yesterday. So we're going to sort it descending by value. So the longest bars will be at the top. And then what we did yesterday was drag profit onto color. Don't follow along with me, but I'll show you, for those of you who weren't here yesterday, if you drop profit onto color, this is what happens. Okay, we can see the amount of sales by the length of the bar, but then the color determines the profit value. We're not going to do that, so I'm just going to drag profit off there and release it. What we are going to do this time is create a stacked bar chart. So we're going to introduce a blue field, a discrete field, onto color, and we're going to use region in this case. Let's grab region and put region onto color. And we can see here now that that bar has been sliced. As we know, our blue fields, they introduce more granularity into our charts. So now we can say the level of detail of this chart is the region. That's the lowest or highest. I don't know which way around it is in terms of granularity, but it's the most granular level of detail in our view. And we've got different colored segments for each region across our categories. And these charts are good for showing proportionality. I would exercise caution if you've got, imagine we had, I don't know, 25 regions in that field rather than just 3, you'd get 25 different colored blocks. The maximum number of colors in a color palette in Tableau is 20. So then you start reusing the same colors, which can be misleading when you have one color meaning 2 different things. So just be careful with that. Also, when the segments get really, really small, it can look like someone's exploded a unicorn on your screen because you've got so many colors, and actually there's not much insight to be gained from that. But for this kind of level of detail region, it's pretty good. And these charts are very good for showing proportionality, like I said. So we can see quite clearly that the central region across all of our categories is contributing the most sales, which is useful information. What we don't get from this is the exact value of each region. We have to either guesstimate from the axis. We could put labels on if we wanted to, but then when you get down to really small segments, those labels often get missed off, or you can't see them. Or the other option, if you don't have labels on, is you have to hover over and see the tooltip for each one to see the actual value. So depending on what you want to show, you may want to use this type of chart to show proportionality, but if you want to show the exact value, then you probably want to use a different chart. So we're going to rename this one as stacked bar, and we're going to duplicate this sheet as well. It's spelled stacked correctly. There we go. So we're going to right click on the tab name and select duplicate, or you can use this little icon right at the top of the screen, which looks like a 2 bar charts. That's our duplicate button up there. So I'm just going to right click at the bottom and choose duplicate. And if we're interested in specific values, then what we can do is just change the chart type here. So you'll see on your marks card, you have this bit that's a little bar chart and says automatic. That's Tableau, as we talked about yesterday, saying you've chosen these fields. I'm going to give you a bar chart because that's the best chart type from a visual analytic perspective. So it's given us that. We can overrule Tableau though by clicking on that drop down. And I'm going to change this to being a circle. Now you can see we get the specific values for each of those particular regions, basically. We can also put little circles around, or little borders around the circles. I might make them a little bit bigger as well. I'm going to click on the size, just make them slightly bigger. If we want to put a border on them, we can click onto color and then choose border, and maybe put a black border around them, makes them stand out a little bit more. So that's sort of 2 versions of the same chart, but one showing proportionality, one showing actual values. And you can see that the axis value, the bottom has changed because we're stacking the values on top of each other in the stack bar chart. The axis goes up to 380K. In the bubble chart, because we're not doing that, we're showing the individual values of each component region of each subcategory. The axis goes up to 220K, which is just above the maximum value for any particular region. So let's call this bubble chart. I think we'll do 2 more charts before we move on to joining data. And again, the solution to this is in that Google Drive file share. So have a look at that. Let's start a brand new tab. And we're going to look at Scatterplot. Scatterplots are great for providing correlation or analyzing correlation. They use 2 axes. That's a big clue to us in Tableau. That means that we need 2 green fields. And to create a Scatterplot is actually really easy. So we're going to use sales and profit. And it's just a question of double clicking on those 2 measures. So I'm going to double click on profit and I'm going to double click on sales. and Tableau will populate that automatically for you as the beginnings of a scatter plot. Now, Tableau always wants to aggregate, and you'll see that our sales and profit are both summed. There we go. And as a result, we've got only one mark on our chart. So one mark is a bar or is a circle, any sort of component of a chart that you can see. There is a useful little information bar bottom left of your screen. Not sure if my zoom will work down there, but you can see exactly a little bit like it says, or tells you in Excel. You can see some kind of important information about what you're doing. So you can see there's one mark, there's one row and one column of data, and the total value of our sales is 2.9 million. Now, what we need to do is break this down a little bit, because obviously we only have one mark. It's not really telling us a huge amount. What I would really urge you to do when you're creating scatter plots is to change the mark type from this sort of hollowed out circle that Tableau gives us to being a filled circle. And if you click the little drop down in the marks card and choose circle, that will be a filled circle for you. So it's a little bit easier to see. And I'm going to go ahead and put a border on this as well. So if you click on color on your marks card again, go down to border at the bottom, and I'm going to choose a black border. If anyone is falling behind or you want me to go over anything, please do let me know. I'm just going ahead as I am. I'd much rather someone yells out and says, "Can you go over that again?" rather than falling behind and kind of losing interest. So do let me know. Okay, let's use our geographic hierarchy as well. We've got this in here, which is actually, no, I think actually we'll create our own hierarchy. I talked about this yesterday, but we ran out of time to actually do it. So as I said, Tableau is always looking for relationships between your fields, and it knows from a geographic perspective that city, state, and country, cities belong to states, states belong to countries. So it puts it into that hierarchy, and you can drill down into it. You can create hierarchies manually if you know that there's a relationship between some of the fields. So in our case, we've got a load of information around our products that we're selling. So we've got category, subcategory, what else have we got? Segment, product ID, product name. So we can actually create something manually for ourselves here if we want to. What we're going to do is grab our subcategory, and we're going to pick that up, and we're going to drop it on top of category. And you'll see Tableau prompts us to create a hierarchy. I'm going to call this product hierarchy. And you'll see now that we've got this little hierarchy there with a little tree diagram type thing. So that's our hierarchy, and we can just drag extra fields into there as well. I'm actually only going to put product name into there. So I'm going to grab product name from the left and just move it up. And you'll notice when it gets into that hierarchy, you get a black line as to where it's going to lie. We're going to put that at the bottom of that little section underneath subcategory. And now what we can do is if we grab our category, put that onto detail, you'll see that we get 3 different circles. I'm also going to actually put category onto color. And we're going to drill down. You can see if we drill down into our category hierarchy, we can expand the detail in there. I'm actually going to turn this around using the little icon at the top. Okay, it's a better shape like this. And then I'm going to hit the plus on the category that's on detail here. So detail is just affecting the granularity of the chart. It's not affecting the color. So we can click on that, go down. This is now subcategories, and we can see based on the color what category each subcategory belongs to. And if we go right the way down to the product name, we can see all of the products in our spreadsheet categorized by their color, which is their category, their product category. And we have our little color legend on the top right. If we find that we're really interested, let's say in our red circles, at the moment they're behind the blue and the orange, we can just rejig this color legend. So I'm going to grab technology and just move it up to the top. Now those red circles will be at the front of everything else, so you can see them a lot more easily. Another useful hint for this is to fade out the colors a little bit, so where you do have lots of overlapping marks, it's easier to see. So again, the key to that is in color. We click on that. We have this opacity slider, used to be called transparency, and we can just fade them out a little bit as well. Scatterplots are quite customizable too. So we can go to our analytics pane again, like we did earlier, click on that, and we've got this average line here. We can grab the average line and drag it on. And we have the option to drop it on the whole chart on one axis or the other. Don't worry about pane and cell at the moment because we don't have any other dimensions on rows or columns. So we're just interested in dropping it on the whole chart. I'm going to add that onto table. That's going to give me an average line for my profit, of my sales rather, and my profit. And the cool thing is when you highlight or drag any outliers, for example, that average line will recalculate, showing you the average of the values you've selected, but then you can still see the average value of the whole data set as well. And then just click out of that to release it. If you I'm not going to do it now. If you right click on the lines, you can edit them. You can change the labels to the value if you want to. You can make them dotted or hash lines, change the colors and all that sort of stuff. And lastly, it could be very difficult to search for a particular circle or particular product if you're looking for one. Then what I'm going to do is introduce something called the highlighter function. So if we go to our product name, right click on that and choose show highlighter, what that's going to allow us to do is to highlight different values here. So that's all of the products in our data set. You can type in the name, or you can, I don't know, highlight anything beginning with, I think there are Canon cameras in here, so I'm going to put CA. Or Canon faxes and photocopiers, that sort of thing. So you can actually narrow it down quite easily if you want to, and highlight specific values in the data set. So pretty useful. The last chart type we're going to do is called a dual axis chart, and there are loads of variations on these. But they are really useful chart types and allow you to do loads of different things. And if you look at the completed version of the Go Past Tables and Bar Charts workbook, you'll see some other variations on dual axis charts, which allow you to do some pretty funky stuff. Okay, we've probably all seen bar charts with line charts on them over the top, for example. That essentially is a dual axis chart where you're combining two measures in one chart. And that's what we're going to look at now. I'm going to grab my order date, and we're going to put order date onto columns. So we'll grab that, and we'll grab our sales as well. That's given us our sales profile for our company, like we saw yesterday. But we're not going to leave it there. We're going to change this line to being a bar chart instead. So I'm going to go into my marks card, go down to bar, and change that to being a bar. So how do we get profit onto here if we want profit? It's quite easy. We're going to grab our profit and we're going to drop it at the other side of the axis here. So as I drag it over to the right-hand side of the chart, you'll see we get this hashed line, and that's where we're going to release it. You get this little green ruler icon as well. So I'm just going to release it there. And what you see now is on our rows, we actually have two measures. We have our sales and our profit, and there's a vertical line between them dividing them. That actually tells us this is a dual axis chart. You can also see we have two axes now as well. We have our sales and our profit. And what Tableau's done is it tries to match up the scale as much as it can between the two measures that you've chosen. It's not particularly helpful, but we're going to make it clearer. So what we're going to do first is you'll notice that on the marks card, something else has happened here. We have an extra marks card, one for profit, one for sales, and then we have one for all as well. The all one will change the appearance of everything in the chart, including both measures. So we don't want to do that. Sum of sales is only applicable to our sales value, and sum of profit. This marks card is only applicable to our profit, which is the one we want to change. So make sure you're on the profit marks card and change it from a bar to being a line. And now you can see that the profit bar was actually, when it was a bar, was overlapping, obscuring the sales bar. But now that it's a line, we can see that much more easily. Now, what I would suggest is if you're doing some quick analysis, let's say you were wondering in your business whether sales and profit had gone up at the same time, this might be good enough for you as a back of the fag packet type calculation. But it's a bit misleading that they have the same scales, because our profit is never going to be the same amount, the same scale as our sales. It just doesn't work like that. So what we probably want to do is actually get these on the same axis scale so we can see where our profit is compared to our sales. John, we can tell by the color. So you can see on the right hand side, we have our blue being profit and orange being sales. What we're going to do is right click on the profit axis, and we're going to choose the option about halfway down, which says synchronize axis. That's just going to, as it suggests, bring the values onto the same scale. And that's probably more informative, I think, than having them on separate scales. As we've got two axes now and they're both showing the same scales, we don't need both of them. They're just going to waste space on our dashboard. So we're going to right click on the right hand one and untick show header. Click on that and that will disappear. If you remember from yesterday, you can use your back button to get that axis back, or you can click on the green field which you want to show the axis for and choose show header, and it will reappear again. One thing to remember now is that this axis doesn't actually relate only to sales, so that's a bit misleading. And for the sake of clarity, we're going to right click on the remaining axis and choose edit axis. And we're going to rename this. We could say sales and profit. I'm just going to say value sterling. And if you want to see how to change the format, the default formatting of each field, so at the moment we've got our sales and our profit as just numbers, no currency. Watch the video from yesterday because I show you how to do that in there. Okay, I think for now, we're going to leave the chart types at that. Hopefully that's given you a little bit of a taster in terms of what is possible. And we are going to look at dashboard actions now. And I'm just going to close that. What I'm going to do as well is ask you to open the starter workbook for filters and actions replace the mega deck. I'm hoping this has an extract in there so you can open it. If not, I'll have to quickly choose an extract or create an extract and re-upload it for you because we are using Tableau Public here. Okay, just bear with me before downloading that because Tableau Public doesn't like it. This is one of the problems with opening or using Tableau Public as opposed to desktop. Just bear with me. I will put another version of this up in the file share. Okay. Sorry, just bear with me. Let's talk amongst ourselves. Okay. It's going into Google Drive. I'm just saving it now. Sorry. Right. Hopefully this is synced. Here we go. Okay, so what I'd like you to do is download this one here, which is filters and actions, replace the megadeck in capitals extract. So Tableau Public doesn't like the original file. There's a message in the chat because we're using something called extracts in Tableau Public, where the data has to be pulled from the data source and put into Tableau's own file type. In Tableau Desktop, you are allowed to have live connections to your data, which is what that file had. So every time you connected to, or you open that file, it's going back to the source spreadsheet, wherever it's saved, and accessing that on an ad hoc basis. Tableau Public doesn't work like that. You have to choose an extract, which is Tableau's own file format. It's one of the quirks of Tableau Public as opposed to Tableau Desktop. But yeah, it's something you can Google and have a look at. Right. So hopefully you've managed to download that. Apologies for the delay. I'm going to go and open that myself. Here we go. We've got a dashboard with nothing in it really, just some charts. Let me shut my window. So we have some charts, but we've got no interactivity in here as well. And yesterday, what we did was we created a dashboard. And then if you remember, we put on the kind of global filters by clicking into each chart and using this little funnel icon. That's the easy way of doing it, but you can get more specific, which is what we're going to do. So what we're going to look at is the way we want to design our interactivity in a dashboard. And we may not want one chart to filter everything else. It may not be applicable. And we're going to look at 3 different ways that you can make your dashboard interactive and consider the benefits, the various drawbacks or merits of each one. First of all, we're going to use something called a filter action. And that is where when you click on something, only the rows relating to what you've clicked on, which are feeding the other charts, are kept. So let's say you were to click on Finland, then everything else would filter relative purely to Finland, nothing else. Okay. And what we're going to do this time, rather than clicking that little funnel icon, is going to the top menu and going to the dashboard section and going down to dashboard actions. And that gives us this interface here where we can add an action. If we click add action, you'll see that there are different things that we can do, different ways that we can interact with our dashboard. And what we're going to do is we're only going to do the top 3, so filter, highlight, and go to URL. The others are a little bit more involved. So we're going to choose filter action for the first thing. And we now get this, this interface window that pops up. And what we have here is 2 boxes. You can see we have the idea of source sheets and target sheets. And source sheets are where you're going to click, and target sheets are which sheets are going to be affected by that click. So for our first filter action, what we're going to do is we're going to say we want to click on the filled map. So we're going to uncheck the highlight table and the circle chart. And we want this to go to the highlight table, so this top right chart here. So we're going to leave only the highlight table checked there. We then have this section to the right of the source sheets, run action on. What that is determining how that filter is going to be kicked off. So hover, as that suggests, when you hover over a country on the map, that would kick off the filter affecting the highlight table. Probably not what we want, because it would be a really rubbish experience for the user. Every time they move their mouse, everything else is filtering, becomes pretty difficult. A menu is a hyperlink. We don't really want to use that for this in this instance. What we do want to use though is select, which is the middle one. That means when you click on something, the filter then happens. Underneath run action on, we have clearing the selection wheel. We want to choose show all values, because when we click off the filter, we want the dashboard to return to its initial state, the general overview. And then what we're going to do at the top is give it a name. So I'm going to say filter highlight table from map. My typing isn't very good today. So when you're happy that your interface is filled out like this and populated like this, click OK at the bottom. You now have that filter in your list of dashboard actions. Click OK. And now when you click on a particular country, you'll notice only the highlight table changes its value. We don't want to have the map affecting the chart at the bottom with a filter action, because we'd lose all context of how countries perform. So if I click on Italy here, if I was affecting the bottom charts, only Italy would be selected, and we would lose any comparison between other countries down there. So we're going to do something else with that. We are going to do one more filter action though. So let's go back into the top menu, dashboard actions. And I'm going to add another action, which will be a filter. And this time, what we want to do is go from the highlight table. But this time, what we want to do is go to the circle chart and the filled map. The reason we can go to the circle chart from the highlight table is we have a region field in there as well, and that will still retain some context in the bottom chart as well. So I think it's okay to use that. Again, it's going to be select, and again, it's going to be show all values. And I'm just going to call this filter from highlight table. When you've got your setup looking like that, click on OK. We have another filter action in our list. Click OK. And then we can click on our regions here and see the bottom chart updates as well as the map. Okay, so still gives us some useful context at the bottom about how a particular country is performing relative to the other ones in its region. Now, I mentioned we didn't want to filter from the map to the highlight table because that would lose all context. What we're going to do instead is we are going to go back into dashboard and actions. We're going to add an action, and this time it's going to be a highlight action. I'm going to click on that. We get the same sort of interface. We don't have the what do we do when we release the filter option, because this is only for a highlight. It's not filtering anything. And what we want to do is go from our map to our circle chart. And we're going to choose run action on the hover this time. We're going to call this highlight circles. So when you set it up like that, click on OK. We now have another action, this time a highlight, running on hover. Click on OK. And you'll see now when we hover over our map, that particular country is highlighted rather than filtered. All right. The last dashboard action we're going to do is a URL action. Now, these are really fun, and you can do some pretty cool stuff with them. What I'd like you to do to start with is to go to a web browser, just start a new tab, and I'm going to type in the name of a country that's in that map. So I'm going to go with, I don't know, Italy. And click on that. And one of the first options that you see will be Wikipedia. And what I want you to do is click on the Wikipedia link for whatever country you've chosen. And what we're interested in here is the structure of the URL of this web page. If I click into the top here, we can see that it looks like Wikipedia has this root structure of the URL, and whatever you search for is appended onto the end. So in this case, Italy. And what we're interested in is that root structure. So what I'd like you to do is to copy, Control or Command C, that root URL up to and including the final /. So basically just missing off Italy or whatever country you've chosen. Copy that to your clipboard, go back into Tableau. And what we're going to do finally is go back into dashboard and actions. We're going to add an action. And this time it's going to be a go to URL action. And what we're going to do is enable us to click on a country and then go to its Wikipedia page when we click on it. What we want to choose here, you'll notice there's no target sheets. That's because we're taking the user out to the web. And we are going to just keep the filled map checked, if that's where we want to action it from. And we're going to run this on a menu as well, because that's actually the best way to do it. You don't want people clicking on something and all of a sudden being pinged out to the internet without realizing what's going on. And in the name, where it says hyperlink 1, this is what we're going to, this is what will appear in the hyperlink in the tooltip when we click on it. You'll see it in a second. So we need to include some instructions in here for the user. I'm going to click for more info on. Then we're going to insert here the country. So if you click on insert, the fields that are included in this chart are available to you to use. What this means is you can see country is in those little brackets. This means it's going to be interactive. When you click on Norway, it's going to say Norway. When you click on Germany, it's going to say Germany. And finally, to make this whole thing work, what we need to do is paste that Wikipedia URL structure into this URL tab or box. And then we're going to do exactly the same thing. Click on insert. And we're going to choose country. And then click OK. OK again. And what you'll find now is if I click on Finland, I now get a hyperlink in the tooltip. So the tooltip, if you remember from yesterday, if you were here, is the information that appears when you hover. If I click for more info on Finland, that will take me out to Finland on Wikipedia. Okay. What we're going to do now is take a little 5-minute break. But what I'm going to do is play a video for you. We're going to look at Hans Rosling in action. And I'm going to, I think there's a way in Zoom that we can play a video and you guys can hear the sound as well. I believe it's here we go, video. Not quite sure how to do this. Tell you what I'm going to do is I'm going to paste the video link into the chat. What I'd like you guys to do is just take a 5-minute break, watch the first 5 or 6 minutes of Hans Rosling. And when we come back, we're going to try and recreate what he's done here. Okay, so I'll come back at about 12 minutes past 3, something like that. And we can carry on from there. Okay. Okay, hi everyone. Hopefully you've watched most of that video by now. It's really cool. Unfortunately, Hans Rosling isn't with us anymore, but he was really pioneering in the world of data visualization. I'm going to share my screen again. What I would like you to do is to go to the data folder again, the Tableau training material, using our file share, go to data and download the Hans Rosling data. So Hans Rosling, I think used data from 1960 something through to early 2000s. I've actually got the same data set, but they've expanded it somewhat, and it goes from 1800 through to 2100. So actually it's forecasting it into the future. And as we've seen with Hans's video, the premise is that the further back we go in time, the more children women were having, and the shorter their life expectancy. And obviously that's to do with I guess over time, there's been advances in medicine, there's been better education, contraception, etc. So those figures, the life expectancy has been going up and the fertility rate has been going down. But what we want to do is, and what we're going to do, is to create this Scatterplot, or as much of it as we can. There is a finished version of this in the solutions, and you'll see that this starts at 1800. We've got the countries represented by the circles. The size of the circles is the population of that country. The color of the circle is the region it belongs to. And we can actually animate this as well. So we can see where these circles end up. And there's a general trend to upwards and leftwards as the fertility rate drops and the life expectancy goes up. We can see through various life, or I guess historical events, certain impacts on life expectancy in particular. This data set actually is really interesting. You can look at countries. You can look at the whole of Europe really during the First World War, rather. I think around 1917, the life expectancy all drops. You can look at countries like Syria and Afghanistan and correlate the drop in life expectancy with the various conflicts that have been going on there. Matt, I see you put without a dip at 1918. Yeah, pretty much around there. You can see. Let's play it again. If we keep an eye out for 1917, 1918, we can see a marked decrease, a drop down in a lot of countries. There you go. So pretty interesting data set, and you can explore it in many more ways than this. This is Hans's chosen way of doing it. So hopefully you've downloaded that data set now. This is what it looks like. At the moment, it's not set up very well for Tableau because it's got each year in a separate column. Tableau prefers long, thin data sets as opposed to short, wide data sets. So we're going to have to do something with this. Tableau allows us to restructure data a little bit, do some pivoting in there. And as I go across, you can see we've got all the years up to 2100. I think there's about 302 columns in here. We also have a metric and a country in there. We also have a separate tab for a region lookup. So this is all the countries that are in that other tab with the region associated with it. All right, let's get back into Tableau, and we are going to start a brand new workbook. So I'm going to say File and New on my computer. And we're going to connect to that spreadsheet. wherever you saved it when you downloaded it, what we can do is just say connect to data. I'm going to go to Excel again and find my Hans Rosling data. Just connect to that. And click open. And we want to drag in our Rosling data tab. Okay. I'm assuming you've all managed to download this by now and you're at the same point as me. We can see we've got 303 columns, 567 rows of data. And I'm just going to minimize this little metadata window. Talked a little bit about this yesterday. We don't really need it. So I'm going to click that little triangle, just give myself a bit more space with my preview. And this is where the preview is useful, because we can see that in this case, Tableau hasn't correctly interpreted our headers in our spreadsheet. And we've got our metric and country on top of fertility rate and the country itself. And then all the years, Tableau's interpreted those just as numbers, basically, which isn't what we want. So what we can do is, if we zoom into the data set that we brought in, so this tab, click the little triangle and tell Tableau that field names are in the first row. When we zoom out again, we can see that now we've got metric and country as a header, and we've got all of our years in separate columns, which is what we want for now. Or the headers are there anyway. Right, we need a long and thin data set, not a short and wide one. When you have lots of different measures, in this case, each year is a measure because it contains values. If I go into sheet 1 here, you can see that I've got a ton of these fields, and it's really difficult to work with data when it's in this structure. If you have 3 or 4 measures like in Superstore, it's fine, but ideally we want one column in our data set for year and another column for value, rather than 300 columns for year, all containing the value. So what we're going to do is pivot this data. We can do that in Tableau. What I want you to do is click on the top of the column for 1800. Scroll all the way along to the right-hand side of that preview pane. Hold down Shift on your keyboard and click 2100. So very much like Excel, we're highlighting all of those columns. And then what we're going to do is click the little triangle at the top of 2100. And we're going to choose pivot in this case. And now when I zoom out, we can see that we've got one column for year, which is what we want, and one column for value. And we can rename these automatically named columns from pivot field names. Doesn't really make much sense. So we're going to double click on that and just call that year. And instead of pivot field values, we're just going to double click on that and call that value. And the last thing we want to do is, you'll see that our year is coming through as text now. We don't want that either. And from yesterday, if you remember, we can reclassify any data types in our fields that get incorrectly labeled. We can click on where it says ABC. And all we're going to do is tell Tableau, actually, this isn't a string or a text field. Actually, it's a date. And it's going to return the 1st of January for each one. That's fine. It doesn't matter. But now we've got a little date icon at the top, so we know that that's formatted correctly. All right. Now, what we're going to do is we're going to go into our sheet 1. And what we need to do now is create our scatter plot. Now, if you remember from the scatter plot that we created a bit earlier, you need 2 measures. We have 2 axes, so we need 2 measures. At the moment, we only have the value, and then we have this generated latitude and longitude. That's because Tableau recognizes that we have geographical data in here, and it matches up the names of each country to the values for latitude and longitude in its own geographical database. But they're not much use to us for our scatter plot. The count, all that's doing is counting the number of rows in our spreadsheet, and measure values isn't applicable here. So what we need to do is we need to have life expectancy on our y-axis and fertility rate on our x-axis. So what this means is we need to create a couple of calculated fields. Now, Tableau has got a whole wealth of calculations that you can perform, very similar to Excel, some that go beyond what Excel can do, others that match up.
There's a couple of queries.
Okay. There we go. Okay, so show us how to change the data type again. What we need to do is click on the little icon at the top and change it from a string to a date. And SC, you said, how do you combine them again? I assume this means pivoting. So I'm going to go back. I'm going to use the back button because it's my friend. Here we go. And to combine all of these columns again, what you need to do is click on the very first year, so 1800, so that whole column is highlighted. So you click on the very top. And what we're going to do is scroll to the right-hand side all the way to 2100, holding down Shift on our keyboard and clicking at the top of 2100. So everything should be highlighted in a bluey gray. Then what we do is click on the little triangle at the top of the 2100 column. And choose pivot. And that's going to make it long and thin for us. Deepak, yes, you're absolutely correct. As a rule of thumb, if you see a ton of different measures, that is probably an indication that you need to pivot your data. So now we have our pivot field names and values column. What we're going to do is just double click on each of the names and call the first one year. No problem. And double click on the header of the second one and call that value. And then finally, we're going to do the change of data type again. So it's coming through as a text field, which isn't what we want. I'm going to click on that ABC icon and change it to being a date. Hopefully that's caught you up. So as I was saying, we go into our sheet, and what we need to do is to create a couple of measures here. We need a measure to go on the y-axis for life expectancy, and we need fertility rate on the x-axis. But at the moment, we don't have those. So we need to create a calculation in Tableau. And there's a few ways that you can do this. What we're going to do is to click on the little triangle just above your list of field names. And you're going to choose Create Calculated Field. And this is the box that comes up to create your calculation. You'll notice on the right-hand side, question from Jin, I have a hash of my value. However, I see you've got a plus. I've got a hash as well, I think. Might not be coming across on your computer. Can you see that hash? Cool. So in this box, when you've clicked on the little triangle above your list of fields, this box appears, and there's a little triangle to the right-hand side of it. And this actually has a expandable and collapsible little box, which shows you all of the functions available to you in Tableau. And they're usefully grouped in this drop down above that. They're usefully grouped into themes. So if you know you want to do a date calculation, you can group them all like that. And if you click on each one, you can see a little excerpt of the syntax that you need in order to make that calculation successful. Okay. We are going to create an if statement now. I don't know if you've created if statements in other technologies before, but what we're doing is saying if a certain criteria is met, then return a specified value. And Tableau can do these. You can do them in Excel or in SQL. I'm sure I'm not a Python or R user, but I'm sure you can do them in those as well. Pretty standard functionality for analytical tools. And we're going to start off by, okay, Jin. So above your list of fields on the left-hand side, you have this little triangle. Click on that and choose Create Calculated Field. No problem. I'm going to make this a little bit bigger so you can see it. Okay, so I'm going to start typing if. So I'm going to type I, and as soon as you start typing anything in this formula box, Tableau's got a sort of predictive text functionality, which will try and guess what you're wanting to do. And all of these formulas, beginning with I, you can use your arrow keys on your keyboard to go down. Luckily, if is the very top one, so I can either click on that or press return on my keyboard, and that's in there. And what we want to say is if the metric, again, just started typing MET, and I'm going to press return. If the metric equals, and then you can use either single quotes or double quotes here. It doesn't really matter which one you use as long as you use it consistently. I'm just going to go for singles, and I'm going to say life expectancy. Tableau is case sensitive. So if we look in our data, life expectancy has a capital L and a capital E. So make sure you spell it correctly. Equals life expectancy, then value end. Every if statement must have an end for it to work. If you don't want to type this out, I'm going to paste it into the chat. So we're going to kind of reuse this in different ways. You'll see Tableau has a color scheme. So any, hey, Joanna, I don't have value in mine. Did you pivot the data like we did in the last step? Okay, you might need to rename it then. Does it say something like pivot field values or something? Okay, just use that. You can either right click on it in this view and choose rename, or you can just use that one. It doesn't really matter. Okay. We're going to call this calculation life expectancy. And that looks good to me. We have a little calculation is valid sign in the bottom left. If I do something like miss off a quote mark, you'll see that I get an error. And then if I click on the error message, it tells me what it is. So I haven't actually finished my string. I've started it off with a quote mark, but I need to finish that off. Those errors can be quite vague sometimes. Sometimes they're helpful, sometimes they're a bit vague, but at least you know when something's wrong. And then we're going to click OK. And you'll see on the left-hand side, we now have another measure called life expectancy. This time it's got a hash sign indicating it's a number, which is fine, but it's also got a little equal sign next to it indicating it's a calculation that we've written. And just as a final check, I want it to be bringing back some values. I'm just going to grab it and drop it onto here on my canvas, and I'm getting some values, which is fine. That's what we want. It's quite a good check just to make sure that your calculations are pulling through some values. We also need to create measures for population and for fertility rate as well. Now we could just copy them out or create them from scratch again, but a quick way to do it. Now we've created one of these measures. We know that the syntax is going to be the same for the others. So what we can do is we can right click on that field we just created and choose duplicate. Okay, now we have life expectancy copy. And then what we can do is right click on that copy and choose edit. Okay, so we have exactly the same syntax that we just wrote and that I pasted into the chat. And Jen, absolutely, you can stack these up. You can have as many as you want. This is just a pretty straightforward example. Okay, this is going to be fertility rate. And what we need to do is just substitute life expectancy for fertility rate in our calculation. Again, make sure that it's capitalized, capital F, capital R, otherwise it won't work. And change the title to fertility rate as well. And then click OK. So now we have two calculations that we've created, fertility rate and life expectancy. I'm going to do the same thing with fertility rate, which we've just done, and just drag that on here. Just check that there's a value coming out, which is what we want. And then drag that off again. And finally, the third one we need to create is for the size of the bubbles in our scatter plot, and that's going to be for population. So our process is exactly the same as what we've done for fertility rate. We're going to right click. You can do it on either of these fields that we've created, it doesn't matter. Right click, I'm choosing life expectancy. I'm going to choose duplicate again. We get another copy of life expectancy, which we're going to right click on and edit as well. And I'm going to replace life expectancy with population. And change the name of that calculation to population as well. Okay. I'm going to open my window again. Hopefully it's not too noisy. It's very, very hot in here. Please do tell me if it's too noisy. Okay, so we've got population as well, and we're going to click OK onto that. And we now have three calculations we've created. I'm going to check the values on population. Okay, looks like that's returning some values. So now what we can do is start building our scatter plot. So we want fertility rate and life expectancy as our two axes. So I'm going to just double click on fertility rate, double click on life expectancy. And these are actually the wrong way around. So I want life expectancy to be on my y-axis and fertility rate to be on my x-axis. So I'm just going to use the swap rows and columns tool at the top. Click on that and it'll swap them around. As we did for our original scatter plot right at the beginning of this session, I'm going to change the mark to be a filled circle rather than a hollowed out circle. So I'm going to go into my marks card, click on where it says automatic, and then change it to being circle. Jin, yes, as Jason said, I don't know if you heard me say just now, but you can have multiple conditions in an if statement. You can stack them up and have lots of them if you want to. Just be careful that you don't put hundreds in there, because that can have an effect on speed and efficiency in a dashboard. So I've changed the mark to being a filled circle. I'm going to go into the color and put a border around it as well. So if you remember, click on the color. Let's have a black. Sorry. See if we clicked on the wrong thing. Going to color, going to border, and clicking on the black border around our circles. What we can do as well, you can see the values are crazy. Life expectancy, 3,000 thousands, 3 billion is that? And that's obviously not correct. So Tableau, as I mentioned, likes to aggregate everything. So we can change this to an average if we want to. And the way we do that is click on the little triangle or right click on the pill if you want to. Go down to where it says measure and change that to being average instead. We should see that becoming a bit more sensible. So fertility rate now has gone up to, or gone down to 4.5. And life expectancy, let's do the same thing. So click on the little triangle, change the measure to average as well. So now that's gone down to 55. So that's more in the realms of what we would expect. Now, we need to change the level of detail in the Scatterplot because we need to introduce country into it. So I'm going to grab country and I'm going to put this onto detail. So now we get one circle per country. There are some null values on fertility rates. That's just where data hasn't been recorded. So we're getting a null value indicator at the bottom. We can click on that, right click on it and choose hide indicator. And lastly, we need to get population onto the size. We want to size these countries by the population. So let's grab population and drop that onto size on our marks card. So you can see India and China are dominating that, as we'd expect, being countries with very large populations. And we can change the sum of the population to be the average as well. Do exactly the same thing, but just down here on the size shelf. Click on that triangle, change the measure to be an average. Obviously, the size of the circles won't change because it's all relative. And then I'm going to bring up the size of these circles as well. So I'm going to click on the size button. Let's make them much bigger. Okay. This is taking shape, but now we need to actually get the region into this chart because we want to color these circles by the region that they belong to. And that field isn't in the Rosling data tab of that spreadsheet. It's in the region lookup tab of that spreadsheet. So we need to get that into here somehow. And this is a brief introduction to joining data in Tableau. If we go back to our data source tab, so we were in sheet 1 at the bottom, go back into data source next to it. There are different ways to join in Tableau. I'm going to show you the simplest way for now. If we do another session in the future, we'll go into this in a bit more detail. We're going to grab our region lookup and we're going to just drag that into the middle here. And you'll notice what Tableau affectionately calls the noodle, this yellow line. And that's going to join these two tabs together. And I'm assuming some of you know about database joins. What Tableau is doing is it's establishing a relationship between these two tabs. Okay, notice that there's a country field in our Rosling data, we can see that in the first column. And then if we look at our region lookup, we can see that there's a country field in our region lookup as well. Okay, so what it's doing is when you bring that in, it's saying, I recognize these two fields as being the same thing, joining on those, and that means we're going to be able to use that region lookup field, the region, in our Scatterplot now. So I'm going to go back into sheet 1. And what you notice now on the left-hand side is we have our region lookup field populated in here as well, separated out by the table, the tab, and the spreadsheet that it belongs to. And that means that we can grab, so this is actually a relationship, Ivy. So you can join in a traditional sense, which we're not doing here, where you physically join two tables together and you can choose between a left, inner, outer, full outer, etc. What this is doing is a new functionality in Tableau called a relationship. So it's specifying where values meet, whether they're the same in both sides, and it's only using those values on an ad hoc basis when you pull them in. Okay, the original joining way of doing it in Tableau, which you can still do, which I haven't shown you, will physically join them together into a big table. But this is quite good if you're working with big data sets. It means that you're not creating one mammoth data set underneath, which is then queried. What you're doing is actually only sort of creating that join when you need it. So what we're doing now is grabbing our region and dropping that onto color. And Tableau's given us our default colors here. So what we're going to do is just change the colors around a little bit. And we can do that just by double clicking in the color legend. So I'm going to double click on Africa. And that gets us our color kind of picker. There's loads of different palettes that you can choose. We're just going to stick with these, and we're going to click on Africa, so it's highlighted like that. Click on orange. Europe is going to be teal. Asia is going to be red. And the Americas are going to be yellow. Once you've done that, click OK. Those colors will be applied to our circles. We probably want to rejig some of these circles. In general, the Asian countries have bigger populations, and they're obscuring some of the other circles. So what we're going to do is grab Asia in our color legend and just drag that down. Drag that down to the bottom of that color legend. You'll see a black line appear, which shows you where it's going. That looks a bit better. We can see some of the smaller values now. Cool. So this is what we want. Now what we need to do is animate this. And what I'm going to ask you to do is go to where it is now. Maybe it's not an option in Tableau Public. Ah, here we go. Format, animations. What we're going to do is turn these off. Now it sounds a bit weird given that we're going to make this move, but the animations that it's referring to here are when you change between a filter in something, that the bars or whatever, they move in an animated way. We're going to use something called the pages shelf, and actually if you have animations on at the same time, it makes it go slower for some reason. So we're going to go to Format, Animations, and then in the little pane that pops up on the left-hand side, we're going to change Workbook Default to be off. And then just click out of that. Now what we're going to do is use this little box at the top called the pages shelf. This is what's going to animate our data for us. Now, because we've put our year into a row rather than a column going across, this enables us to use the pages shelf. The pages shelf visualizes one row after another. So if you've got sequential data that makes sense to have in that format, you can actually scroll through it in the background and it creates an animation for us. And what we're going to do is grab our year from the left-hand side in our dimensions, and we're going to put that onto the pages shelf. And you'll notice on the right-hand side, we now have that set at the very first year in our data set, and the values that have been filtered in our Scatterplot to 1800. And we can see in the tooltip there that the year is 1800. And now if we press play on that, we have these 1, 2, and 3 bars. That's the speed of the animation. I'm just going to put that onto the third. And if we press play on this, you'll notice that your Scatterplot is now animated. Joanna, I don't really understand your question. Okay, so you disable the animations, and then what you need to do is grab your year and put that onto pages at the top. And that will create this little control panel for you where you can press. Is Tableau allowed to export as movie GIFs? No, it doesn't, unfortunately. We can export as PNGs or JPEGs. You go to worksheet at the top and export. I think because I've got multiple screens here, sometimes it puts these up on different ones. Not quite sure why that's not working, but it does allow you to export images if you want to, of dashboards as well. Joanna, I think maybe you haven't renamed it as well. It might be pivot year value or something. It's probably a legacy from the pivoting right at the beginning. No problems. Okay, so that's our Scatterplot. What we do need to do is create that big number, which is going to scroll through as our Scatterplot scrolls through as well. So what we're going to do is start another tab. I'll call this one Scatter. And let's call this one Big Number. And what we're going to do this time is we're going to grab our year and put our year onto text on the marks card. So we'll grab that and drop it onto text. And what Tableau is going to do is just list out all of the years in our data set. So it's going from 1800 to 2100, as we kind of expect. What we're going to do again is put year onto the pages shelf. So I'll grab year again, put that onto pages. Again, that's filtered it to 1800, same as it did for the Scatterplot, right at the very beginning, and we get that same control panel to allow the animations. A couple of things we're going to do here. We need to make that number really big. That's going to go in the bottom left corner of our dashboard. We're going to go to the drop down at the top where it says standard, and we're going to say entire view. At the moment, that 1800 is just one little cell in the top left of our canvas. So we're going to go in the drop down, choose entire view. We can now click on that. That's the whole screen as one cell now. And we're going to right click into this and we're going to choose format. And that gives us our format pane on the left-hand side. First thing we're going to do is make this number really big, make this year really big. So where it says pane, the pane is the bit that we're in at the moment. I'm going to make that really huge, maybe 72. I'm also going to make it bold as well. I'm going to tone down the color a little bit. I'm going to make it a light gray. Two more things we want to do here. First of all, change the alignment. So at the moment, it's justified to the right-hand side. So you'll see in this formatting interface, you have these headers at the top. So the one that says A relates to the font. We want to click on the second one, which relates to alignment. And then again, in the pane box, we want to choose middle for horizontal and vertical. And then last thing, at the moment, this has a white background. When we drag this onto our Scatterplot, we want to make sure that you can see any circles that are behind our big number. So we can actually make this transparent. And what we're going to do is click on the next header in the formatting window, which looks like a tin of paint. And at the top one, where it says worksheet, we're just going to click on none. That means there's going to be no formatting or shading behind this worksheet. So effectively, it's transparent. It doesn't look it at the moment, but when we drag that onto the dashboard, it will allow things to be seen behind it. Cool. The two component parts of our Hans Rosling Scatterplot are here. Final thing we need to do is put both of them together onto a dashboard. So we're going to choose the middle option. Again, if you were here yesterday, exactly the same thing. Choose the little button that looks like a window with a plus. That's our dashboard. I'm going to change the size here to, I'm going to click on where it says min 420 by 560. Click on that. Click on the range. I'm going to make this a fixed size. I'm not going to make it the size of my screen. I'm going to choose generic desktop. So change it from being a range, which is the default, to being a fixed size, and then generic desktop. You can choose whatever size looks good on your screen. And we have our two sheets that we've created available to us. So we have our Scatterplot and our big number. And we can grab our Scatterplot and just drag it on. And then we also want to grab our big number, but we want to be able to place this a bit more precisely. So we're going to make this actually floating. And what we're going to do is when we drag it on, you're going to hold down Shift on your keyboard and then left click and drag that tab onto our chart. Okay, so now it's floating. You can move it around wherever you like using the little handle at the top. We don't want it to say big number on there. We actually don't want any header on there at all. So where it says big number, I'm going to right click and choose hide title. And then I'm going to make this a little bit smaller. For those of you who weren't here yesterday, we should always put a title on our charts or our dashboards. Bottom left corner of the screen, you see you've got a little checkbox that says show dashboard title. Click on that. And then we can double click where it says dashboard 1. I'm going to make this a little bit bigger. We can double click into dashboard 1 and say, like Hans Rosling. Let's see. make it bold. And I'm also going to get rid of the scatter 2100 title because it doesn't really make much sense. I'm going to hide that. Okay, there is a completed version of this with nicely formatted tooltips in the solutions folder on Google Drive. So you guys can download that and kind of reverse engineer it. But now, if we press play, I'm going to change this to being the fastest speed. What we can do is press play, and both of those elements in our dashboard animate and go up to 2100. This is a really interesting data set, actually. If you fancy a little pet project to have a look or explore Tableau a little bit more, I'd suggest you could play around with this some more. There are some quite interesting observations if you make line charts out of this data. You can see at various points in time for various countries that there are significant dips in both life expectancy and fertility rate. So yeah, have a look around. But that's pretty much us now. It's 4 p.m. We've been going for a couple of hours. I hope you've enjoyed it. I appreciate it's a lot to take in, and thank you so much for the questions that you've asked as well. It's always nice when people are asking questions because it means that you're still engaged, and it makes it a bit more interesting for me. So thanks a lot. And if you want to contact me on LinkedIn or anything, feel free to look me up. Further to yesterday, if any of you are considering a career in data analytics, then we're constantly hiring throughout the year on our trainee consulting program. So yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you, Luke. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah. Thank you. That was amazing. I've been playing along as you've been going, and I've actually made something, and it's cool. And yeah, you don't need any knowledge of anything. You can just take a data set and create something that's very useful.
Yeah, for sure.
So thank you for yesterday. Thank you for today. Yeah, if anybody wants to get in touch with Luke, we'll be sending around contact details. Sorry, my throat's going. And we'll hope to try and bring you back in person, and probably in the new semester, maybe.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Cool, thank you. Yeah, we've run out of time, so unfortunately we don't have any time for questions, but yeah, James has just put in, if you've got some feedback, please fill that in, and we'll be sending the videos and the slides around. Thanks again.
Excellent. Are there any final questions before we finish? Silence. Okay, cool. Go and get an ice cream. I think that's what I'm going to go and do.
Cool. Thanks, Luke.
All right. Well, beer time, Jason. Push the boat out. Go on. Okay. Nice to see you all. Take care.
Thank you.